Hello everyone and welcome back. Today in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to color in your line images using Photoshop, and as you can see I have opened the image that we cleaned up from the last tutorial, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new document, size 12 by 12, 300 pixel resolution. And then I'm going to go over here to my original image and click on the layer that actually contains the line art. Holding down my shift key, I'm going to drag it from the layers panel over here onto my new document. And by holding down the shift key, that will just perfectly center your image. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and close out my original. And no, I don't want to save the changes. And now we have our image ready to be worked on. Okay, now click on the layer right beneath the image layer, and then we're going to flood fill it with white. Okay, now we're ready to begin. But before we get started, what I'm going to do now is I've grabbed an image from the kit that I'm going to be using later when I create my layout with this image. Is Blush by Studio Rosy Posy, and I'm going to go ahead and make a color swatch from that. So I've already gone up here to image mode, and then as you can see I've got indexed color turned on. So I'm going to now click on color table, and I've chosen a color swatch of 20 colors, and I have 20 beautiful colors that will really match nicely with this image. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'm going to save it right to my desktop, and I'm going to name it Blush. And click save. And then I'll say OK. And now I'm going to go here to my swatches, and I'm actually going to drag my swatch layer over here since I'm going to be working with it quite a bit. And I'm going to go here to reset swatches because I do want to have my default swatches available for me. Okay, now I've got my default swatches, and now I'm going to also go in and load the swatches that I just saved. Okay. I'm also going to change this to large thumbnail. So I'll do that just by clicking on my little tab here and changing that to large thumbnail. Okay. Now I'm ready to begin. You want to make sure you have your swatches available to you easily. You want to make sure you've got your layer panel available for you also. And now we're going to begin coloring. Okay, now I'm going to add a new layer just by clicking down here on the new layer, and I'm adding that directly beneath my line drawing and above my white background. Okay, I'm going to click on the layer 2, and now I'm going to go in with the magic wand tool. Because we're using the magic wand tool, it's very important that you zoom in on your image and go in and make sure that all the lines to your drawing are closed. And in this particular image, I happen to know that they are, with a few minor exceptions. If you look here, you can see her eyebrow is open, and so is the area on her lip. And I'm going to go in and with a very small paintbrush and the color black, I'm just going to fill that in. And actually I'm going to go even just a little smaller. And now I'm going to do her lip. Okay, that looks good. Okay, when you're satisfied that all your lines are closed in, you can go ahead and get started coloring. Now that that's done, I'm going to go ahead and merge my new layer with the original. And now I'm going to start another new layer. And I'm going to hold down the control key and just click new layer, and that adds it directly beneath my line drawing. We're not going to be painting at all on this layer. We want to preserve its integrity, so you can go ahead and lock that layer. And by doing so, you'll see if I choose a color here, and I go over here to paint, I don't have any access to it at all. So make sure you just turn that on, lock that layer, and you won't have to worry about accidentally painting on it. Okay, go down to your new layer, and we're going to start with her skin actually. And when you're painting skin tones, you're going to need a skin tone color chart. So I have one here that I found on the web and I use all the time. So I'm just going to open up my skin tone color palette, and then I'm going to select a nice color tone. I think I'll try this one since it has a little bit of pink to it. And I'm going to select a brush. And I always like to paint with a nice soft brush. And I'm going to turn on airbrush so that I have a nice smooth flow. And I have my opacity set to 100, and I have my flow set to 100 as well. Now what I'm going to do is click here on my new layer. Now I'm going to hold down my shift key and just begin clicking all areas of the skin. Okay, it looks like I got everything. Now, if I zoom in a little bit, you can see that the marching ants go right up to her skin line. And if I were to begin painting, when I was finished, there would be just the tiniest margin around the skin line. So to get rid of that, I'm going to go to Select, Modify, and then Expand. And then I'm going to expand it so that it reaches beyond the pixels of the line drawing. And I'm just going to expand it about 4 pixels. Actually, I'm going to make it 6. Okay, now you can see that when I paint, I'm going to be painting actually past the edges of the line drawing. And if I were painting on this layer, which I won't be, I would actually be painting onto the line itself. But I'm going to be painting on a separate layer right beneath my line drawing, so it's going to fill in all the areas nicely and not leave that line of demarcation. Okay, now we're ready to start painting. I've got my color chosen, and I'm going to choose my brush. I've got a brush size of 100, and I'm using airbrush. So I'm going to just begin now. And you can paint, since we've got everything selected, we're not going to spill over into any area, so you can just go ahead and paint really freely. And make sure that you're filling in all the area of color nice and evenly. Now we're going to firstly just fill in all the areas that we want to paint with color. And once we filled in all the areas, then we'll go back and add some detailing. Okay, that looks good. Now we're going to create another layer because we're going to begin painting in different areas. For each area that you paint in, you want to create a new layer. And this will save you so much time if you make a mistake or want to change something later. So I'm going to just grab my magic wand and zoom out a little bit. And now I'm going to work on her dress. So I'll go back up to my line drawing and start selecting. make sure you Control D or deselect, and then hold down your Shift key and begin selecting areas in her dress. Okay, once you've selected all the areas that you want to paint, remember to modify your selection by expanding it. This time I'm not going to expand it as much. I'm going to go with 4 pixels. And now go back to your newly created layer and choose a color that you'd like her dress to be. And I think I'll choose this one. Now I'm going to select her trim and create a new layer. Now I want this color just a little bit lighter than the original color, so I'm opening up my color palette, and then I'm just going to go in and choose a lighter tone of the same exact color. Okay, and now that she's all colored in, we're going to go ahead and start adding some highlights and some lowlights. And we're going to start with the skin. So zoom in a bit and select all areas of the skin. Okay, this time I'm going to save that selection so that when I go back for I'm going to start with the lowlights and then I'll do the highlights. So when I go back, I'll have that available. So you just go to Select, Save Selection, and then I'll title it Skin and say OK. Now I'm going to create another layer beneath my drawing. And this time I'm going to select a color tone from the skin palette, and it's going to be complementary to the tone that we used prior. And then we're going to get a nice soft brush. And I'm going to be saying as if the light is coming in from the left, so therefore it's going to be shadowing her right side more so. And I'm going to begin painting that on. If you find your brush is a little too small or too large, you can go ahead and resize it. And then just start shading areas of the skin. You want to focus mainly on the edges. And now I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And I'm going to blur that out some just to make it blend a lot more. Then I'm going to use my layer mode to bring the opacity of that layer down some. And to add a little more depth, I'm going to duplicate it. And then I'm going to set it to linear burn. And bring the opacity down. Now I'm going to go to my eraser brush. And I'm going to I'm going to bring the opacity up a little bit. And now I'm going to just erase some of the portions so that I'm just leaving just the outermost edges. Okay, once you're done erasing, I'm going to go ahead and deselect that. And now you can play with your opacity mode to bring that down a little bit. Okay, now we're going to create another layer, and we're going to load our selection again. And on our new layer, this time we're going to work on bringing in the highlights. So I'm going to select a much lighter color for her highlights of her skin tones. I'm going to lower the opacity of that just a little bit. And you can play with your layer modes and see which you like best. And now I'm going to pretend as if I'm actually painting outside the line. But none of the paint is going to go outside the actual lines because I have my selection made. But I'm positioning the brush outside of the lines so that just the bare edges are going to become painted now. And I've set my color to a darker tone, and now I'm just painting right along the edges, and you notice how that's giving it some shape. Then I lower the opacity of that just a little bit. And now you want to continue painting on the rest of your image the exact same way. You want to make your selections and go ahead and do some highlights and some lowlights on the clothing area. Now, once you have everything looking exactly the way you want it, you've painted all your layers and your image is looking pretty good to you, you can tone down the colors of the outline a bit just by recoloring it. And to do that, you want to just click on the little lock here to unlock your layer, and then click on it, double click, and choose Color Overlay. And choose a nice tone that complements your color but isn't as harsh as the black. And choose OK. You can bring the opacity down just a little bit if you want to as well. Then what you're going to do is grab your magic wand tool and click anywhere outside of the lines. You want to zoom in. And now we're going to expand it just a tiny bit. Actually, we're going to do it just 1 pixel. And then we're going to go to Layer, Merge Visible, select, Modify, Feather, and set your feather to, I'd say about 0.5 should be good. And now hit the delete key. And now you've completely colored your image and it should be looking pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is show you how to add a little bit of texture to your image to make it really stand out on the page. Okay, so we're going to add a couple of filters. You want to duplicate your layer. Actually duplicate it twice. And we're going to turn off the very top layer and go to our second duplicate, and we're going to go to Filter, Texture, Craquelure. We're going to zoom into about 50% here. I've got my spacing set to 7, the depth is at 2, and the brightness is at 7. And I'm going to say OK. Now I'll zoom in a bit so you can see how that looks. We've got some texture in it. Now we're going to go to our second copy. Then we're going to go to Filter, Artistic, and Rough Pastels. Our stroke length is set to 3, stroke details set to 3. We have our texture set at sandstone, scaling is at 58, and relief is at 13. And we're going to select OK. So now we're going to set our rough pastels copy to lighten. And now we've added some really nice texture to our image, so you can just go ahead and layer, merge visible. And now we're just going to save her as a PNG. So go to File, Save As, and scroll down to find PNG, and just name your file as you wish. And I'll save her as Fairy. And OK. I'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.